Lovely to see Venerable Vimala and Lou and a few others who popped onto the screen. Lovely to spend some time with you and really share what our practice has, what we had gained through our practice, what freedoms we have been able to gain, what we've been able to let go of. As Lou mentioned, I was telling Lou the meaning of the of my title, and it just means spirit mother in Thai. In the Thai tradition, they don't have a word for nun. So whatever level you are at, whether you're an Anagarika level or Bhikkhuni level, everyone tends to be called Mae Chee. So that's what it means. I'd like to begin with a Namo Tassa and then do some Pali chanting. I'd like to chant the Dasa Parami. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dana parami sampano, dana upaparami sampano, dana paramata parami sampano, metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagawa sila parami sampano, sila upaparami sampano, sila paramata parami sampano, metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagawa nekama parami sampano, nekama upaparami sampano, nekama paramata parami sampano, metta maitri karuna mudita upeka karami sampano. Iti piso bhagawa panya parami sampano, panya upaparami sampano, panya paramata parami sampano, metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagawa viriya parami sampano, viriya upaparami sampano, viriya paramata parami sampano, metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagawa kanti parami sampano, Kanti upaparami sampano. Kanti paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan sacha parami sampano. Sacha upaparami sampano. Sacha paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan aditana parami sampano. Aditana upaparami sampano. Aditana paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan metta parami sampano. Metta upaparami sampano. Metta paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan upeka parami sampano. Upeka upaparami sampano. Upeka paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan dasa parami sampano. Dasa upaparami sampano. Dasa paramata parami sampano. Metta maitri karuna mudita upeka parami sampano. Iti piso bhagavan. So if we reflect on those 10 beautiful qualities, those perfections, and whether we have cultivated them within our practice. And that first one, dana, generosity. Giving to others, giving of ourselves. Do we give the best of ourselves? Or do we give our all, maybe leading to some fatigue or exhaustion? Can we employ some equanimity, some balance, some evenness? when we practice Dhamma. And Sila, that beautiful moral compass that's created by the Buddha's guidelines on conduct. Are we actively cultivating harmlessness, trustworthiness, respectfulness of our own bodies and others, truthfulness, clear-headedness, that wonderful foundation for our practice, all of these precepts. And of course, nekama, that renunciation of what we no longer need, what isn't useful for the inner journey, the spiritual journey. What can we let go of to free ourselves? The distractions of the world, hindrances that keep us stuck. What are we actively cultivating in the way of renunciation? And the cultivation of wisdom. Have we grown wiser through our meditation practice, through our contemplation of the suttas? Have we become freed a little more from ignorant tendencies? And what about energy? How much energy do we have for our practice? How much energy is created through our practice, cultivated through our practice? And patience, that highest of austerities. Very difficult to progress without a cultivation of patience. Are we patient with ourselves? Are we patient with others? How much do we cultivate patience actively in our daily lives? And truth. Are our thoughts and deeds and actions aligned with the truth, with the Dhamma? Do we find ourselves in right view or saying things like if only or they should? How much in line with the Dhamma is our life? And strong determination and adhitthana. Strong determination to continue with our practice. Whatever hurdles happen to be in the way. And metta. That benevolence, goodwill for ourselves and others. How much are we actively cultivating this loving kindness for ourselves and others on a daily basis, on a moment by moment basis, even? And upekkha, equanimity. Have we gained more of an evenness of mind? Taking responsibility for our actions, realizing how our actions create what comes next. And seeing the world as it is. So we'll sit for a short while longer in silence, just letting these paramis just rest in the heart. So the title of this talk or sharing is, has my practice borne fruit with freedom or insight, and it's part of the 10 subjects for frequent recollection. And in Pali, we have Alam Arya Jnana Dasana, meaning really a supreme freedom and insight and knowledge. But the translation, I'm used to chanting in English, so I chant the 10 recollections before I go to sleep at night. Has my practice borne fruit with freedom and insight? So we're not, we can widen that to looking at slightly more mundane achievements in our practice. And so I'd like to share some of my experiences over the years, and it would be lovely to hear how meditation has helped you and how you've gained insight into things and become free from tendencies. So the first one that comes to mind is freedom from an inordinate fear of the dark. I started meditating when I was in my 20s, and if anybody had asked me when I started meditating, was I afraid of the dark, I probably wouldn't have considered myself to be any more afraid of the dark than anybody else. But of course, I was fooling myself, because all that had happened was I'd grown tall enough to reach a light switch. So I had been a Goenka student for a number of years. And at the time I lived in Chester, which is not that far from Liverpool. And my meditation place was outside my bedroom door on a landing which had no windows. So I would always leave the bathroom light on at the end of the landing for safety reasons. And I would have my shrine with my candles. So one evening I was sitting there, and this is probably maybe about 8 years into my meditation practice. And my partner, who I lived with, came up the stairs and shut the bathroom door. And I was aware of this and thought to myself, it's okay. He's behind the door. The light is still on. And then he came out of the bathroom and was halfway down the stairs. And I almost said to him, please, could you turn the light back on? But I hesitated and thought, I will just sit here. And my candles are, of course, lit. So I decided to take a sneaky peek to see if they were still alight. And of course, they had gone out. So I was sitting there in the pitch black, couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And I had a split-second decision to make. Was I going to jump up and switch the light on? Or was I going to sit with this discomfort, this uncomfortable feeling that was getting increasingly more uncomfortable? So I decided to sit there. And the fear grew and grew, so much so that it felt like an external entity crawling along the carpet towards me and crawling up the side of my body. So being a good Goenka student, I was repeating to myself, just observe, just observe. And I started to shake internally. Whether I was shaking externally, I can't remember. But it reached a crescendo and then it dissipated. But the amazing thing to me was that with all of this internal shaking, there was a pool of stillness which was completely unshaken. And although my fear of the dark, which of course is a perfectly natural fear for us to have, my inordinate fear of the dark, should I say, it wasn't completely gone. I had won the battle, but not the war. But I felt a lot stronger as a result. And a short while later, I remember that fear coming back in the middle of the night. And I was able to say to it, I don't know whether it was out loud or internally, I know what you are, and I'm not afraid of you. And that fear just vanished like a spark. So to me, that was, I felt, as I said, a lot stronger through just sitting with that discomfort. And when you come to think that, there are people who go through the whole of their lives with this fear. I used to know an elderly lady, very accomplished lady, lived into her 90s, terribly afraid of the dark. She lived in a residential home and couldn't be in the dark. Always had to have a light on because she would be absolutely rigid with fear. So I'm incredibly grateful to my practice, my Goenka practice at the time, for freeing me of that petrification when I started to feel fear. So we can, of course, it's wonderful when we sit in meditation and we have very pleasant experiences, but we can also sit through some pretty unpleasant things and come out the other side a lot stronger than we were before, letting go of anxiety, letting go of fearfulness. And certainly this helped me in my monastic life because, of course, ordaining in the forest tradition, I was out in the woods in the dark of the night, having to either sort of go to or from my kuti. So I was certainly very grateful not to have this sort of obstacle of inordinate fearfulness, which I had managed to let go of. Something else which I suppose happened at the very beginning of my practice, and really something that started me meditating and kept me meditating, was lack of concentration, which I'd also suffered from for much of my life up until then. And I'd gone on to further study, but I'd met two new friends who happened to be Tibetan Buddhists. And I explained my dilemma that I was going on to further study, and I was bothered by distraction. Where I was living, was I going to be able to concentrate? And they said, have you ever tried meditation? It improves your concentration. So that was it. I was determined to practice, and started going to various local groups. I was incredibly fortunate in Liverpool at that time. There were so many groups. There was Tibetan groups, Soto Zen groups, or Soto Zen group, which I sat with for quite a while. But the interesting thing about starting meditation was I had a boyfriend at the time who was very averse to meditation. Anything that smacked of anything spiritual was something that he wasn't interested in at all. And also he could see that meditation had become the center of my life, and he wanted to be the center of my life. So he was effectively knocked off the top spot. So he actually gave me an ultimatum. He said, it's either me or meditation. So I had to choose. And so you can imagine what I chose. I chose to continue meditating. And why was I so committed? Because it was freeing me from distraction. It was really helping me to focus, which has been a huge blessing. And I can't say I won the battle with that completely. When I started out 30 odd years ago, there were certainly many distractions, and of course, all the more so today. But certainly, meditation practice can free us from distraction, make us realize what is the most important for us to concentrate and focus on, and what we can let go of, which is not needed for our inner journey. And certainly, when one reflects on things that can distract us, when I was preparing to ordain at Amravati, I stayed up at Miltune, which is a hermitage where Ajahn Chandasiri resides. And I'd been doing a lot of contemplation on disenchantment. And I felt compelled to do some drawing. So I drew a path to Nibbana. And I found myself drawing these circles of enchantment at either side of the pathway. And I'd been very into music for a lot of my life. And I felt as though I gained a much deeper insight through contemplating disenchantment, and through actually visually seeing this drawing I had done, showing me that when we go off that track and get enchanted by other things that don't lead us to the final goal, then there's a lack of ease in there. What we'd previously considered to be enjoyment and easefulness, because of our meditation practice providing a greater sense of ease, we begin to realize that those things that had enchanted us previously had lost, had begun to lose their luster. So contemplating disenchantment, nibbindati, was something that I found really, really helpful before I went forth. I mentioned I had a partner some years ago when I was talking about my inordinate fear of the dark, and he had some problems of his own, which I tried to help him with. He was incredibly supportive of me meditating. And I discovered a therapy called transactional analysis, which I'd started to study and to try and help him with. But what I didn't realize was how much of an effect it was having on me. So by practicing meditation in combination with studying transactional analysis, it actually helped to free me of my inner critic. So both my mother and grandmother, I feel as though it was very much learned behavior. They were quite hard on themselves in terms of, this sort of almost like having a sort of mental stick to beat themselves with, should get up earlier, do more, etc., etc. And I had inherited that through these learned behaviors. But one of the things transactional analysis helped me with was realize just how completely useless this critical parent voice was. And one day, the final sort of like situation that brought it to a head was something. I was doing something incredibly mundane. I was feeding my cat, and it occurred to me that this critical voice was never ever going to praise me, no matter how much I listened to it and felt it pushing me to do better and better. It was never going to praise me. Its words were like dust in the mouth. So when I contemplated that, I realized, well, I don't need it. I can let it go. And then, of course, it seemed that all hell broke loose. So there was this huge panic attack. And it was almost like this critical voice was like a screaming banshee saying, you need me, you need me. And I felt my throat closing up. So it was an incredibly physical experience, but an amazing one, because that critical voice is now incredibly tiny, almost non-existent. And one of the benefits is that if I do make a mistake with something, there is more of a sort of mature voice that provides some advice or just states the obvious, but without criticism. And the biggest example of this was when I was part of the winter retreat support team at Amaravati. And during the winter retreat, at weekends, there would be lots of day visitors. And all of the support team would need to go and have their meal first after the monastic sangha. So one of the monks would take up a microphone and would announce that the winter support team needed to get ready to go up to the servery. And on this particular day, I was listening to the monk, who this particular monk would always say, the winter retreat support team would need to go up now. But we always knew to look to see where the anagarikas were, whether they were still taking food from the servery. But on this occasion, I was just listening to him. So as soon as he said, can members of the winter retreat support team get up now and go to the servery, I got up and I walked towards the servery. And there were all these people saying, sit down, sit down, sit down. So I went back to my place, and a friend in front of me teased me and said, oh, you have brought shame on the whole of the winter retreat support team. And at that moment, I feel ordinarily I should have been full of embarrassment at what I had done. But all that was occurring to me was just, oh, I must remember to look at the anagarikas. And there was nothing else. And I had just stood up in front of hundreds of people in the sala. But there was no criticism. There was just the acknowledgement that I should have been listening, but also looking. And that was it. Nothing. And so it freed me from that sort of self-consciousness and embarrassment, which is amazing, really. So, for instance, recently I spilled a cup of tea when I was trying to help somebody carry a tray, and I could feel my cheeks reddening, but there was no critical voice. So it's amazing how if we work on ourselves in terms of the inner critic, that we can let it go, because it doesn't provide any useful framework to help us. I'll see what else comes up. Ah, yes. On another occasion, and I don't recommend this. I felt compelled to check my emails in the middle of the night one night. And what actually happened was I read an email that was actually going to throw out my year. It was a decision that was being made, and I hadn't realized that this decision was going to be made, and I had planned. So this happened about 10 years ago. But the wonderful thing about it was, because of my practice, I read the email and I felt the shock, but I stopped. I chose to stop and be with the feeling, and just let that feeling just percolate through me. And I came up with a phrase: percolation without commentary. So we are just being with that shock, that discomfort, and just sitting with it and just letting it percolate through ourselves. And it really cut the grief in half. So I don't recommend checking your emails in the middle of the night, but I do recommend, if you haven't already tried it, if you do have some shocking news, something that would normally cause you to fall into papancha, into that over analyzing, then if we stop, and this is why body and breath practice is so important. Just be with how we are meeting whatever news we're receiving, just to receive it and just let it percolate. Easier said than done, but through our practice, we can really help ourselves by just stopping that thought process, choosing to just be with the feeling. And of course, so many feelings do get stuck in our bodies. So just being with a feeling and not jumping to the thought process is a wonderful way to really free us of trauma. I remember meeting two extreme examples of people who had so much trauma stuck in their bodies that they had lost their muscle memory and how to relax. So that's a salutary lesson to us as meditators, to really stop that from happening, to just be with whatever discomfort and shock to the system we may be experiencing, and just let the wisdom of just being with the body, being with the breath, and letting that news, that information percolate through, and to free us from grief and trauma that would have been severely increased had we engaged in our thought process. And certainly my current practice is very much to cultivate compassion and patience with my situation, with my mother, for whom I'm a full-time carer. I refer to it as working at the rock face. And as I think Jack Cornfield said, your family push your buttons because they installed them. So I rather like that quote, because that is what family members do. They know you very well, and they know your weak spots. But of course, that's an opportunity for us as Dhamma practitioners to work on those weak spots, to strengthen ourselves. And what better way than through compassion and patience with ourselves and with others, so that beautiful bud of metta, of goodwill, flowering into compassion. And in terms of the Brahma Viharas, I like to see the root as equanimity, that stability for that flowering to take place, of that goodwill flowering into both compassion and sympathetic joy. So we have these, these wonderful, wonderful qualities that the Buddha outlined, this wonderful pragmatic system to work with, to go deeper into, so that we can, release ourselves, grow in wisdom. So that's what I would like to share with you this evening. Wanted to offer some more chanting, and I fell in love with Pali chanting on my Goenka retreats. I remember the first retreat, I was just completely bowled over by the chanting, and I remember at the end of the retreat, when we were allowed to speak, I asked somebody how they had got on and their course, and they said, "Oh, I've really benefited from being here, but I don't know about the chanting. I really didn't like the chanting." And they said, "Would you believe some people are, sending off for the cassettes," because it was cassettes in those days. And of course, I didn't actually say that I was one of the ones that was sending off for the whole of the the whole of the cassettes of the Pali chanting, because I had been positively affected by it. So that really led me towards the Theravada practice, and away from the Soto Zen, which I found a little too esoteric. So and I had so much Pali chanting, of course, when I was a laywoman, and then of course became a monastic at Amaravati. But then I moved to a Thai temple, and of course they had quite a different, an extra set of chanting. So what I'd like to share with you is a chant called the Mongkon Jagawan, and that is a protection chant, protection in 8 directions. So it's a very joyful and jolly chant. So I'd like to share that with you. Masaming Mongkon Jagawan Dhamma Di Prasiti Jong Ma Ben Kam Ben Geo Tan Jet Jong Ma Bon Gan Hom Long Rob Krop Tu Anatta Raja Se Mana Kete Samanta Satayo Chata Sahasani Buddha Jala Parekete Karakantuk Surakantuk Imasaming Mongkon Jagawan Dambati Prasiti Jungmaben การเป็นเกโยตันเจจองมาป้อนกันหอมล้อมรอบกรอบดูอานัตตาราชเสมานาเกเตสัมมันตาสตโยชตสหัสหัสานิธัมมาจาลาปะเรเกเตrakantuk sorakantuk Imasaming mongkon jagawan tambeti prasiti chungmapen kambengkeo tanjechang mapan gan hom long rop krop tuanatta Rajase manakete samanta satayo chada sahasahasani pacheka buddha chala parekete arakantuk surakantuk Imasaming mongkon jagawan tambeti prasiti chungmaben การเป็นเกโยตันเจจอกมาป้อนกันหอมล้อมกรอบกรอบตัวานัตตาราชเสมานาเกเตสัมมันตาสตโยชตสหสหัสานิสังฆาชาลาปะเรเกเต Rakantuk surakantuti. So that last verse, including Sangha, and of course the wonderful I Sangha, which I joined initially during, well, it was, I don't know whether it was when we were out of the lockdowns, but certainly it was around the pandemic time. So very grateful to have had that experience of being able to sit in the mornings at that particular time. And hoping to see some or all of you at Tellurian in May, when Venerable Vimra has invited me for Vesak. So it'll be wonderful to be at Tellurian again. So very much looking forward to that and celebrating Vesak with the Tellurian Sangha.